all the interviews and the case studies and all of the media about AI-assisted software development, you'll see companies saying things like 80% of our code is generated by AI, or even things like, we're building almost everything with AI. And it can make you wonder, are we behind? Should we be moving faster? There's this sense of anxiety, I think, sometimes. But, the reality is that adoption is very mixed. And if you're thinking seriously about these questions, you're here today, you're probably not behind. But this space is moving quickly, so standing still isn't the answer either. And I guess the challenge is not just adopting tools. It's really evolving how we can build software without losing the things that matter. So this is good architecture, strong security, robustness, and confidence in delivery. We know the organizations that we see out there seeing durable gains, they're not throwing away good software engineering principles. Sure, there's a change, but they're adapting how they work while staying anchored in them. So today we want to talk about what actually works in practice and how to measure whether or not AI is making a difference. And here to help me do this are Godfrey and Sergei Matheson. Welcome. Two of our most experienced engineering experts, both principal consultants, and both with a wealth of experience from building greenfields, from modernizing core systems to working in a wide variety of domains. And I guess also, they're seasoned practitioners and they've seen it all. They were there for the adoption of Agile. They're there for the adoption of cloud, which really was not so long ago. I'm sorry, more research. So we thought rather than just, presenting a series of slides, it would be much more useful to have a sort of an expert session where you hear directly from the people who are navigating this challenge. So if you work in engineering, you've all rolled out software tools. And, the conversation now is shifting from access and experimentation to impact. So let's start there. So Serge, I want to start with you. When leaders read, these big AI engineering stories, what do you think they're missing?
Well, I'll preface this with, I think, something that applies to everything we discuss here, which is this is an incredibly quickly evolving space. And this is what we think currently. This is based on past experience. Ask us again in 3 months and we'll give you hopefully a better answer.
Yeah.
But I think one of the core issues is that engineering leaders often mistake access to the tools for a valid operating model. Engineering leaders focus on the wrong things sometimes. It's not just making Claude code available. How does the process work at a team level? So we shouldn't just be focusing on individual productivity. We want a solid, reliable delivery system that uses AI and leverages it to its fullest. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty about how teams should work differently. They're given tools, but they're not given a benchmark. They're not given structures for how you should be using these tools. So as a consequence, quality and trust issues emerge, especially as the amount of code going to production increases as a factor of AI agents being used to scale that code. How do you know it works as it should? So there's a buildup of a kind of cognitive debt of code that no one understands, becoming the new tech debt. So what we've noticed in practice is that, in a team, 1 or 2 engineers might get very fast, but testing, review, product decisions, operations all still move at the old speed. So the challenge is not, do we have the tools? It's, do we know how to use them in a way that improves delivery across the entire product lifecycle, across the entire team? So there was a major Australian company that I worked with that mandated Claude code for everyone, for all engineers. They'd paid a lot for tokens, but they'd still only managed to deliver a couple of web forms over the course of 2 months. The AI agent wasn't the problem. The process was.
Yeah, that's a really good observation, Serge. Thank you. So I guess one of the things, that we've talked about, I talk a lot with you and Warner about, you know, this notion of like, where should we be? Like, what should we be aiming for? What does good look like? And we see these maturity models doing the rounds. I guess there's one out there at the moment. I don't know if everyone's seen it. It's by a very experienced, somewhat outspoken software engineer named Steve Yeg. Some of you will know him. He does a lot of writing and speaking on how to use AI tools. He's written a book. I guess, you know, Warner, is that a useful way to think about what's happening right now and what teams should be aiming for?
Look, it's somewhat useful and definitely describes the evolution that we're seeing with clients adopting AI tools. And you know, typically we're seeing people getting to the stage of relying less on the IDE and the autocomplete and moving, and I guess letting go of the steering wheel a little bit. And moving towards a like a Claude Code type model where you are driving the agent using your prompts. But I guess what it doesn't describe is the prerequisites to achieving those levels, or how to mitigate the risks of adopting more and more agentic workflows. So, and I guess especially I'm finding that sort of level 3, you'll see on the left, the individual workflows, you know, running the agents without permission checks, which is a risky proposition and shouldn't be taken lightly. So I guess there's also the impacts of what the AI maturity might have on the rest of the pipeline. And it's very quickly going to start to impact the review and verification stages of the pipeline, put pressure on those. And also then getting up to the sort of multi-agent workflows. One of the examples that I've seen is, you know, it's important to make tools available to support both types of workflows, and also some guidance on when it's appropriate. Using, you know, orchestrated agents is not really suitable for some of those smaller scoped and simpler tasks that could be readily achieved using a single agent.
Yeah. I definitely think that there's an important takeaway there about not leaning into lines of code, you know, thinking more about your individual use case. Yeah. Okay, so I guess the next thing I wanted to ask is, you know, let's break that down a little bit more concretely. You know, Warner, what does this practice look like? So when teams start really getting value from AI, like what actually changes in how they work?
Fundamentally, the principles shouldn't change. Just the way that they're achieved. So, and I guess the practices, you know, they might be things like automated testing. They need to be robust enough to handle the increased velocity that you know, is achievable with some of the AI tools. So I guess, and with that comes more feedback more often. So yeah, you need to be able to pay attention to that feedback, and it's going to grab your attention. So you know, you need mechanisms to keep track of all that, you know, I guess noise, and work out what the next step to take. So I guess some of those things could in turn be, you know, solved with AI, and I guess we're going to start to see more and more happening in that space. But I think as far as what good looks like, there's going to have to be a level of verification with the output of our teams with using these tools, and that means that test automation is increasingly important. So capturing, and not just testing how something works, it's testing the desired behavior and focusing on that. And it's not to say that everything's going to become an end-to-end test, and because that's going to cause its own problems with slow running suites, but having that behavior orientated perspective in the test suites at different levels. And with that becomes, the evidence we've seen is the more modular and more loosely coupled a code base is the easier. It's easier for AI and humans to comprehend. So those, positive, or let's say, what we're trying to achieve with architecture and software architecture is still relevant. But I guess coming back to the original question, I think where what will change in an organisation is providing these tools and also a safe environment for the tools to run. So there's a lot of security controls that have to be put in place, access to data in a safe way, and also the ability to actually make your code bases and data available to a model that you have somewhat some controls over, and so that's a big operational concern.
Yes, and I think that's a really important takeaway, and it becomes more important when your practice becomes a bit more mature and you're starting to use more agents. It's all about agents at the moment for everybody. So let's talk about agents specifically. So what happens when teams move in that direction?
Definitely, there's more pressure on the review and verification side of things. So the number of changes, hopefully not the size of the changes. That's probably a smell that needs to be addressed in the way that the tools are being used, is to guide them a little bit more into making concise and deliberate change. So that's that's going to put a lot of pressure, especially on senior members of the team, to review that code, and it can quickly get out of hand and become a bigger bottleneck than ever. So some of the things we're seeing to counteract that is more reliance on some of those software quality verification tools in pipelines and putting those things into checks before there's a human review. And then looking, and there's opportunity to start to look at the change from various different perspectives before you get a set of eyeballs on it. And then beyond that, we've seen examples in, I guess, the more that someone with businesses with a healthy risk appetite is relying less on the human review and more on the increased monitoring and self-healing capabilities within their system. So that's one end of the spectrum. But I guess that confidence needs to come from somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we just talked about agents and testing and all of these different things. But I guess, this is an important point to make is AI shouldn't just be seen as an engineering tool. There are other roles, involved in the software delivery product lifecycle. So Serge, I've heard you talk quite passionately about this. Why do you see this as something that affects the whole product lifecycle, and what happens if organizations only optimize engineering?
To be honest, I think people seeing AI agents and AI in general as something that is really only useful for engineering is a very reductive point of view. It's going to hamper you over the long term, even the medium term. AI has value before engineering starts, after code is written, in discovery, in shaping the product, design, debugging, support, operations, maintenance. You can use AI to add value at any stage in the product lifecycle. So if engineering is the only thing that gets faster, the only thing that you use AI tooling on, then the rest of the delivery system becomes the bottleneck. And that just means you're moving fast in one little area, but as a whole, you're just as slow as you ever were. So really, this is about augmenting the product team and the delivery lifecycle, not just helping developers type faster. Leaders should really think about the full loop of delivery. So ideas to building, to releasing, to monitoring, to debugging, to improving. If AI acts as an accelerant, it needs to accelerate maintenance, confidence, and learning as well, not just development. So I've talked to some of my former colleagues, some of whom now either run their own companies or are heads of engineering. One thing that stood out in companies that most successfully adopted AI was that willingness to investigate using it at every stage of the product lifecycle. So not just helping developers type faster, but building self-healing systems that, connecting observability through to an AI agent discovering that there is a bug, submitting a pull request for a self-healing system, providing guardrails and workflows for non-technical contributors. So, a lot of things get left to the bottom of the backlog, and we don't want to focus engineering effort on them. But there are product owners, product managers, even customer support who are really passionate and want to contribute features. How do we best make it so that they can leverage AI tooling to do so? But at the same time, make sure that the things they're working on aren't going to negatively affect the product. So a friend of mine implemented a traffic light system for contributions. So if there's red, this is not something you want to work on without an engineer present. If it's green, absolutely. You as a non-technical contributor can definitely make a difference here. So it takes a bit of thinking about how to apply AI augmented engineering and AI agents to the entire product lifecycle.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's an awesome example, Serge. Of course, we would like to point out that your friend doesn't work in a large enterprise, so it's really horses. It's really horses for courses, right? You need to consider your environment, the skills of your people, and how you're going to enable them. And then.
Just before we move on, he absolutely does. He is the person I'm thinking of is in a smaller environment, which does allow them to be a bit more nimble. But a lot of the same lessons can be taken by larger enterprises. It's a question of how you actually scale up the concepts.
That's right. That's right. And I think this raises a really important, leadership question around confidence. In order to commit to doing something like that, leaders really need to maintain confidence. If you're accelerating speed, if you're generating more code. So Warner, how do leaders maintain confidence in what's being built?
Look, there's confidence, and there's I guess some of that comes from what we already know is keeping the changes small and releasing often. And the evidence has shown that results in higher reliability and less incidents using the concepts behind continuous delivery. So that doesn't change. Just the rate of change is yeah, is going to increase. So it's like driving. The faster you go, the more risk there is of something catastrophic happening. So it's being aware of those risks and driving to the conditions, as my dad would always say. So and I guess adopting these tools, it's working in those low risk areas. So like you might have, if you're in the payment industry, you'll have PCI compliant, pieces of code which need to undergo review and be compliant with the PCI regulations. So the you wouldn't, unleash an agent on that code. You work in a low risk area first. And like with that traffic light area, you might have the different levels of controls that you employ. So identifying, and I think as an industry, we've got to get a lot better at managing our risk in this, both security and also just the adoption tools that don't have this deterministic outcome. So, but there's also an opportunity here with experimentation. With what I'm saying is, companies can consider a lot more options, and they might even just be technical options when we're coming up to architectural decisions and optionality. We're able to explore a lot more in the same amount of time, and some of those things will actually help increase our confidence overall.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So if you've got confidence, I mean, obviously the next question you're going to be asked is, how can I measure my ROI? How can I, sort of demonstrate to the business that this is actually working? So Serge, I wanted to ask you, so how should leaders think about measuring whether AI is genuinely improving delivery?
It's a really good question, Kirsty. I think, harking back to what I was saying earlier, it's about how well the system performs. So measure system outcomes, not individual productivity theatre. That's nice, it's fantastic, but it's not what actually matters to your product. I would definitely advise introducing baseline metrics before diving deeply into AI-assisted ways of working. And if you have them already, that's fantastic. It gives you a fantastic baseline to be able to see what impact they're making. Focus on flow and stability together. So lead time, deployment cadence, reliability, quality outcomes. Do be careful with lagging indicators and also with simplistic interpretations of delivery metrics. So tool usage, prompt counts, lines of code, they're very easy to collect, but they're rarely persuasive evidence of impact. In and of themselves, they don't actually say anything about the value that you're delivering to production. Leaders also do need to account for the real cost side of the equation. So licenses, tokens, experimentation overhead, vendor dependencies. It's often some of those costs are absorbed by the actual team members themselves, which means that you're hiding some of the cost of doing business. So I would advise for people just kind of dipping their toes into it right now. So start simple. If you've got something like Dora or Space or whatever you have in place, build on that. Bring in some team member sentiment analysis to see how people are adapting to it. And then as time goes on, you can bring in some more AI-specific metrics. So that could be linear B, it could be DX, whatever's most appropriate. But start small.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really good advice. So I guess really, another big topic here when you talk about, the change that people are trying to make is scaling. We all work with someone, even me as a non-practitioner, who is extremely effective with AI tools. We have these power users that are dotted across our teams and organization. So, how do we scale beyond these power users? So, Warner, I guess I'd like to ask you, what is your advice for scaling that capability across an entire engineering group?
I think leveraging those power users, and that can be sometimes in the form of a centre of excellence where you've got a team that is responsible for ensuring the safe adoption of tools and the effective adoption. Like what we had with continuous delivery, but probably unlike continuous delivery where we've got the deployment patterns and standardized pipelines. I'm not sure if the future might prove me wrong, but I'm not sure if we're going to see such a cookie cutter approach to the workflows that we're seeing with AI. So I think there will be patterns, but more importantly, patterns always need context. So in the context in which they're effective. So, by creating a pattern and expecting it to be reused everywhere, that's probably unrealistic, but there are going to be elements of that pattern that can be taken and applied in a different context. So how far we get with regards to consistency is yet to be seen. Because we are talking about low-level workflows here. So but I guess on that concept of a centre of excellence, it's not only important to be that sort of guiding light, but also to actually share knowledge with and work hand in hand with teams adopting AI to share knowledge, experience, and also an understanding of the intent and some of the how these systems are working, and then also act as a conduit back to understand the limitations of some of these tools in these various contexts. So there might be an opportunity to improve the tool. There might be just let's go ahead and work on an alternate approach for this scenario. But so I guess that pattern, the meta pattern, or I guess structure, is probably not too dissimilar to what we've seen with rollout of Agile and continuous delivery.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, Warner, just a little bit. We're all adopting something new again. So there are a lot of lessons to be taken from when we adopted Agile and when we adopted cloud. And I do feel that not the only, but maybe the major difference now is that it's moving so much faster, which is why communication and shared understanding, and this is not working for me, and having someone to talk to in terms of that central excellence is so important, because within teams today, I think people can feel like, not quite sure what to do here, and you can feel alone.
So I guess it's up to everyone to share their experiences.
Yeah.
And it's, they could be showcases, they could be more of a community of practice where you've got like-minded people sharing their successes and their failures, or
Yes.
so that's all part of the learning process, and I guess help distribute the knowledge and improve.
Yeah, that's right. And so I know certainly, like, we've distilled this into a little bit of a playbook here, but the main takeaway is obviously find some measure of consistency, with leadership support, enabling environments, making sure you've got the safe way is the, empowered way with the guardrails and so on. Measure and I guess understand what it is that's going to be telling you that, things are moving in the right direction. And then really embed, which is all of that, having exemplar teams or sharing, doing all of those things. That's kind of how we've been approaching it, and it's proved to be quite a successful way to roll this out. But, leaving a playbook aside and, that kind of high level. So, Serge, if you were advising an engineering leader starting this journey today, what are the first 2 or 3 things that you would focus on?
Oh, good question. Look, I would say you need to have confidence in your delivery pipeline. You need to know that if something goes through that delivery pipeline, it is ready for production. You need metrics for understanding the delivery of value as a team. How much actual value are you delivering to production?
Yeah.
Third thing I'd probably say is this journey requires buy-in from the top down and the bottom up. So make sure that everyone is actually part of the effort. You can't just drive change from the top down, and bottom up grassroots change can hit an obstacle when it comes to the executive level. So make sure that everyone is aligned and facing the right way.
Yeah, those are really good points. And I guess to ask the question in a different way, Warner, what mistakes would you avoid?
Turning off the turning off the user prompts without actually understanding the impacts. So it just needs to be a conscious decision. It's obviously very important to move to those agentic workflows, but working within a isolated environment in which those tools can operate with a consideration towards especially the data that you're utilizing, the internet access, and that avoiding those trifecta that will allow data to be exploited with a malicious prompt. So look at where your prompt's coming from, the data it has access to, and where it can go. Those things, all 3 of them together, make the lethal trifecta. And that's with conscious thought, you can constrain an environment maybe only 2 of those things and introduce a bit of safety.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's the end of our, I guess, little conversation.